In this video, we will be going over the solutions to the Unit 6 test. So the first question in the Unit 6 test was asking us to describe the angles of parallelograms. And here I did give you the description of all the properties of parallelograms just to help you. You could have looked through here to find your answer. So we're describing the angles. So here it says opposite angles are congruent and consecutive angles are supplementary. So the answer was the second one right here. Next, we're going to find the value of y. So when you're finding y, we learned that opposite angles are congruent. So here, y is opposite of 44, which means y is congruent or equal to 44. In this next question, we're finding the value of x. We learned that consecutive angles sum to 180, or they're supplementary. So here, if you look at angle J and angle K, those are consecutive. So that means they're going to add up to 180. So they're not congruent, but they sum to 180. So we could say x plus 44 equals 180. So we wanted to get our answer then, we worked backwards. The opposite of adding 44 would be to subtract 44. So our answer here would equal 136. This next question wanted to know that you understood the diagonals of a parallelogram. So if you look at our properties, it says the diagonals bisect each other. Bisecting means they're going to cut each other into two congruent halves. So that would be the answer, the third answer choice there. In this next question, we're finding the value of x. Since we know that for parallelograms, the diagonals bisect each other, that means that this part of this diagonal and this part of that same diagonal must be congruent because they're bisected. So they're cut into two congruent halves. So that means 2x plus 6 has to equal 36. And we could use that equation to solve for x. Here, the opposite of adding 6 would be to subtract 6. And then the opposite of multiplying 2 would be to divide 2. So our answer for x is 15. Here we're going to describe the angles of a rectangle. And here are the properties. So we look for the angles of a rectangle. It says that every angle is a right angle. So all these corner angles are 90-degree or right angles. That would be the correct answer choice, where it says the angles are right angles, so they measure 90 degrees. This next question wants us to find the value of x. Well, if you look at where these two angles are located, they make up the top corner angle, and we learned that the corner angles are all right angles or 90 degrees. So that means I can add these two together, 4x plus 8 and 5x minus 8. And together they're going to sum to 90 degrees because they form a right angle. Here we're going to combine like terms. So I'm going to combine the 4x with the 5x and then the positive 8 with the minus 8. So we get 9x. 8 minus 8 is 0, so that cancels. So our equation is 9x equals 90. And then the opposite of multiplying 9 would be to divide 9. So our solution for x is 10. Next, we're asked to describe the sides and angles of a rhombus. Well, we look here. It says that a rhombus has 4 congruent sides, in that the diagonals are angle bisectors, which means that the diagonals cut each angle into two congruent halves. So this would be answer choice, the first one here. A rhombus has 4 congruent sides. The angles are bisected by the diagonals, creating two congruent halves. Since we know that for a rhombus all the sides are congruent, then that means here we could say that 8x plus 27 is equal to 12x minus 9. Here we're finding the value of x. Since this one has an x on both sides, I'm going to get rid of one of them. I like to get rid of the smaller one, so I'm going to get rid of 8x. Now I'm going to start solving. Here they're subtracting 9. The opposite of subtracting 9 would be to add 9. And then they're multiplying 4 times x. The opposite of multiplying 4 would be to divide 4. So our answer for x is 9. In the next question, they want us to find the value of x. We know that the angles of a rhombus are bisected by the diagonals. So that means these two angles are part of that bigger angle that was cut in half. So that means those two small angles must be congruent or equal. So we could say x plus 67 is equal to 8x minus 38. Here I'm going to put an imaginary 1. And now we can solve for x. Since I have an x on both sides, I'm going to get rid of one of them. I like to get rid of the smaller one. And now I can start solving for x. So they're doing minus 38. The opposite would be to add 38. This comes out to 105. Then they're multiplying 7. The opposite of that would be to divide 7. So my answer for x is 15. This next one wants us to describe the diagonals of a square. Here it says the diagonals of a square bisect its angles. The diagonals of a square meet at 90-degree angles. So they bisect each other and form right or 90-degree angles. In this next question, we're finding the value of x. Well, we learned that for a square, the angles are all 90-degree angles. So that means that here, 3x plus 54 has to equal 90 degrees. So we can use that equation to solve for x. The opposite of adding 54 would be to subtract 54. So here I get 36. Then the opposite of multiplying 3 would be to divide 3. So we get 12 for x. This next question wants to know which quadrilaterals are not parallelograms. Well, parallelograms have two pairs of parallel sides. So if you look at this diagram, the only two shapes that don't have two pairs of parallel sides are trapezoids and kite. For a trapezoid, one pair of sides is parallel, but the other pair is not. So these two right here are not parallel, so that makes it not a parallelogram. And for a kite, none of the sides are parallel, so that's not a parallelogram. In this next question, we're finding the measure of angle T. Angle T is right here. We know that isosceles trapezoids, the base angles, so like for the top base, the two angles are going to be congruent. So if angle V is 60, angle T is also 60 degrees because these two angles here are congruent. And our bottom angles would be congruent to each other, so Y would be congruent to Z. This next one wants us to find the measure of angle M, which is right here, and we know angle J. These two are not congruent. One's on the top, one's on the bottom, but they're consecutive base angles. So since they're consecutive, we know that these sum to 180. So 142, we add that to angle M, is going to give us 180. So to work backwards, we would just subtract 142 from 180 to get our answer, and that would come out to 38. In this next question, we're finding the median, MN. And they told us HJ equals 32 and LK equals 70. Those are my two base angles. So this could be like my base 1 and my base 2. So the formula for median is you add your bases and divide by 2. So you could add 32 plus 70 and then divide by 2. This comes out to 102 divided by 2, which equals 56. Sorry. I wrote this wrong. This should be a 60, not a 70. So it's 32 plus 60, which comes out to 92. And if we divide that by 2, that comes out to 46. This next one wants us to find the measure of angle Q. We know that since this is a kite, the opposite angle of Q, angle S, is congruent. And we also know, since it's a quadrilateral, that all 4 angles add to 360. So what I would do first would be to add the 2 angles we do know. Because angle P and angle R, if we add them to angle Q and angle S, they all sum to 360. So angle P and angle R are 110 and 48. So we can add those together. That comes out to 148. And then if we add those to the other 2 angles, they sum to 360. So what I would do is I would subtract 360 minus 148. That comes out to 112 degrees. Sorry, 212 degrees. So angle Q and angle S add up to 212. And since we know angle Q and angle S are congruent, that means they're equal. So all we would have to do if they're equal then, and we know that there's 2 angles, is divide 212 by 2. And that comes out to sorry, I think I made a mistake somewhere. Give me a second. Okay, so I would start by adding the 2 angles I know. So I'm going to add 110 plus 48. That comes out to 158 degrees. Then we're going to subtract that from 360. So we're doing 360 minus 158. That comes out to 202. So that means the 2 angles, angle Q and angle S, sum to 202 degrees. But since we know that angle Q is congruent to angle S, or they're equal, that means I could just divide 202 by 2 to get my answer. So if you divide 202 by 2, that comes out to 101. So both angle Q and angle S are going to be 101 degrees. This next question, we're finding the length of side BC, which is this side right here. If you notice, this makes up a small right triangle because we know that the angles formed by the diagonals of a kite are all 90 degrees. So we can use the Pythagorean theorem to find side BC. So we're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C is our side BC there. If we do 7 squared, 7 times 7 is 49. 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16. Those add up to 65. And then at the very end, you would have to square root it to get your answer. So the square root of 65 comes out to about 8.06. So that would be the length of BC. In this next problem, we're finding the area of the trapezoid, and we're using the formula base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2 times the height. Here our top base SV is 12 inches. Our bottom base TU is 6 inches. So those are my 2 bases. And then my height UW is 5 inches. So I'm going to do this one step at a time. 12 plus 6 is 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And 9 times 5 is 45. So my area would be 45 inches squared. This next one, we're finding the area of a kite. To find the area of a kite, you multiply the two diagonals and divide by 2. Here, diagonal AC is equal to 18 yards, and diagonal DB is equal to 9 yards. So we would do 18 times 9 divided by 2. 18 times 9 is 162. And if we divide that by 2, it comes out to 81. So our area would be 81 yards squared. You can use this video to help you with your makeup test, or you can use it to help you complete the CHEMOS form if you pass the original test but want a higher grade.